Matafa. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I trust you have enjoyed your lunch and have been sufficiently nourished to take you through this afternoon's activities. It is my pleasure to act as the chairperson for this afternoon's after-lunch session, and particularly to introduce our keynote speaker. This very distinguished-looking gentleman on my left is Mr. Victor Ordonez, who is the director of the UNESCO Principal Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and as is usual in UNESCO, the acronym for that office is PROAP. This office, as I said, is located in Bangkok. Prior to his taking up the directorship of that office, Victor Ordonez also served at the headquarters in Paris as the Principal Director of Basic Education Division and the coordinator of programs and interagency efforts in the Education for All initiatives following from the Jomtien meeting. Some of you in this room may have also joined us in Jordan, where we had the mid-decade review, and Victor was one of the people who assisted in leading us through that review process. Mr. Ordonez has also had a political career in his own country, the Philippines, and has served as Deputy Minister and Undersecretary in the Ministry of Education, Culture and Sports. He has also served in other key government positions in the Ministries of Trade and of Government Reorganization in that country. He has served as an academic dean, planning director, graduate school dean, college president, and board chairman of various academic institutions in the Philippines. He was also a professorial lecturer at the University of California, Los Angeles, and a research fellow at the East-West Center in Hawaii. Mr. Ordonez holds 7 academic degrees with honors, including a PhD in Oriental philosophy, and has pursued postdoctoral studies in management at the University of Wisconsin, Harvard University, and the Asian Institute of Management. In short, we have a most accomplished and highly intelligent fellow in our speaker this afternoon, and he will be speaking to us on the first theme, Learning to Know. Mr. Victor Ordonez.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for that very generous and almost embarrassing introduction. But it was a pleasure to be introduced by a person whom I have truly come to admire. Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon, the topic assigned to me is Learning to Know in the 21st Century, the first of the 4 pillars, the first of the 4 keynotes on each of these pillars. This conference has an abundance of keynotes. Maybe there is an abundance of keys that are needed to open and unlock the doors to education in the 21st century. The vastness and diversity of the Asian context makes a discussion of learning to know in the future a difficult topic. Whereas in some areas, technology and prosperity have brought about a lifestyle that is truly symptomatic of the future, there are other areas, even within the wealthier countries, where poverty, remoteness, and other factors conspire to produce an environment that has not really changed from previous centuries. In fact, as resources and technology help those who have these gallop ever more rapidly into the future, an increasingly greater gap between them and those who have not is engendered, creating a disturbing and disturbed polarizing world. In short, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, not only in wealth, but in technology, and most importantly in knowledge, which is the one aspect of wealth that is not immediately affected by currency meltdowns such as we experience in Thailand, where I live, or in the Philippines, where I am from. But frankly, what worries me is not just so much the distance between the rich and the poor countries, between, say, the Australias and the Indias, but rather the gap between those in the same country, between the government administrator in Delhi and those who live in the hovels in the deserts of Rajasthan in India, between the university professor in Melbourne and the Aboriginal communities in the great central deserts of Australia. The distance between Delhi and Melbourne is 18 hours. The distance between the university professor and the villager is a far greater journey, requiring much more effort. Nevertheless, the irreversible trend towards globalization and increased interdependence and communication are pushing all communities at varying stages and at varying speeds towards a new and somewhat unpredictable future. Ladies and gentlemen, let me confess to a dilemma I am now facing. First of all, I do not find myself in my accustomed role of presenting you an analysis of education statistics and data from UNESCO, usually aided by my computer graphics on a big screen here. In addition, I am aware that this paper has been or will be distributed to each of you, and if I read this in its entirety, I will bore myself sooner than I will bore you. Especially after the many rich, in fact the avalanche of ideas we received this morning and the incredibly high standard the dynamic speakers this morning have set for all of us. And especially since it is in the siesta hour after lunch. So I would like to spend my time together with you by simply underlining three simple, even predictably obvious points that I make in my paper, and then teasing out the not so simple, complex, even profound implications and provocative policy options that these points suggest. Learning to know in the 21st century must be anchored on a clearer understanding of what one needs to know, how one gets to know, and who does the knowing or the learning. These are my three simple points to make. Number one, the content of learning will be different. Number two, the process of learning will be different. And number three, perhaps not stated often enough, the learner will be different. Let me take each of these in turn. The content of learning will be different. As knowledge and discovery go ever faster forward, it can be said that half of what students learn today will be obsolete in the next 5 years or so, and half of what students need to know to succeed in the future has not even been invented or developed yet.